Have you ever felt a moment so quiet, so full, that it almost scared you? The kind of moment where a single breath, a single tiny sound, can change everything you thought you understood about yourself. Because that's what happened to me the night I held her for the first time. When the room was dim, the world felt paused, and I realized life was about to grow in ways I wasn't ready for. If you want to know how everything shifted in just one heartbeat, stay with me. It's a story that doesn't start loud, but it stays with you long after it ends. In the peaceful suburbs of Austin, Texas, where the tall oak trees swayed softly in the warm evening breeze and neighbors lifted their hands in friendly waves as they passed, lived a woman named Sarah Collins. At 42, Sarah had a life that many people would call full, yet also heavy with responsibility. She worked as a pediatric nurse at the nearby children's hospital, a job that demanded long shifts, calm patients, and a constant flow of compassion. She had chosen this profession because she wanted to help, to be a steady presence for families facing their hardest moments. Even though her work took up most of her energy, her heart was always attached to home with her husband Mark and her 17-year-old stepson, Ethan. Sarah never expected that one of the deepest relationships in her life would grow not from blood, but from choice, effort, and time. When she first met Mark, she felt something settle inside her, as if she instantly knew he was the man she wanted by her side. He was gentle, reliable, and steady. He was the kind of man who kept his promises and never said anything he didn't truly mean. He carried his own scars though, especially the pain of a difficult divorce that left him raising Ethan part-time. Mark loved his son fiercely, and when Sarah entered his world, he made it clear from the very beginning that Ethan would always come first. Sarah admired that about him. It was one of the reasons she loved him so deeply. But it also meant that marrying him wasn't just becoming a wife. She was stepping into the role of a stepmother, something that came with no handbook, no clear rules, and no guarantee that she would ever be welcomed. Those first years were the toughest. Ethan was 12 when Sarah officially became part of his daily life. At that age, he was old enough to notice the shift in his family but still too young to fully understand his emotions. He carried his feelings quietly, often hiding in his room with his video games or headphones on. In the beginning, he treated Sarah like she was simply another object in the house, someone he had to acknowledge politely every now and then, but nothing more. Whenever Mark encouraged him to include her in conversations or family outings, Ethan would nod out of obedience but rarely participate. Sarah remembered that time clearly. The sting of trying so hard to reach a child who seemed to push her away without even realizing it. She made many attempts to bond with him. She cooked meals she knew he enjoyed, sat on the sidelines cheering during his soccer games, bought him art supplies he casually mentioned wanting once. Sometimes he responded with a small nod or a quick thank you, but more often he slipped back into his quiet bubble. Many nights, Sarah would lie awake next to Mark, staring at the ceiling and wondering whether anything she was doing mattered. "Maybe he'll never accept me," she whispered one night, her voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. Mark had reached over in the darkness and squeezed her hand gently. "Give him time. He has been through more than he ever says out loud. But I know my boy. He sees your effort, even if he doesn't show it yet. One day, he'll understand." Sarah wanted to believe that. She held on to the hope that patient, steady love could eventually reach him. So she kept going. She stayed consistent. She asked about his homework, helped him when he got stuck on a difficult assignment, and stood through full soccer matches. Even when the Texas heat made her dizzy, she never tried to replace his mother, who lived far away, but she tried to be someone stable in his world, someone who cared in a quiet and dependable way. Over the years, small shifts began to show. Ethan would sometimes wander into the kitchen while she baked, lingering awkwardly nearby. He would ask her opinion on or show her a funny meme he found online. At games, he started giving her a quick wave when he spotted her in the crowd. They were tiny changes, but to Sarah, they felt like giant steps. Little by little, the walls he had built began to loosen. Still, she often wondered whether he truly saw her as part of his family, or if she was simply the woman who lived under the same roof. That question stayed inside her for years until one cold December evening, when Ethan answered it in a way that took her breath away. It was mid-December, and their neighborhood was glowing with holiday warmth. Houses sparkled with lights, wreaths hung on front doors, and the air smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon. Sarah had been working extra hours at the hospital to help cover shifts for coworkers who wanted time off with their children. She didn't mind. Many of the young patients had nowhere else to go for Christmas, and she wanted to be there for them. But the long days left her tired down to her bones. One night, she came home later than usual, her feet sore and her shoulders heavy. She stepped inside expecting to hear Mark watching television or Ethan listening to music upstairs. But instead, she heard soft holiday music drifting through the house and saw a warm, gentle glow from small lights. She walked in slowly, slipping off her coat. "Mark, Ethan," she called. There was a short pause before Ethan's voice called back from upstairs. "Up here." Puzzled, Sarah climbed the stairs. When she reached the top, she stopped suddenly. The hallway had been transformed. Delicate white fairy lights were strung along the walls, filling the hallway with a soft, magical glow. Paper snowflakes, clearly hand-cut, hung on the doors, each one with a different pattern. And across the hall, a simple but bold banner hung with the words, "Thank you, Sarah." Her breath caught immediately. She pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes wide and stinging with sudden emotion. Before she could call out again, Ethan stepped out of his room holding a neatly wrapped present. His tall frame looked unusually shy, his shoulders slightly hunched as he shifted his weight. "Ethan, what is all this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. He swallowed hard, his eyes flickering between her face and the floor. I wanted to do something for you. For me," she repeated softly. He nodded. "You've done so much for me. More than I ever told you. I know I wasn't easy when you first came into my life. I know I wasn't always fair or kind. But you didn't stop trying. You kept showing up, and I wanted you to know I noticed. And that I'm grateful." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest, and her eyes filled with tears she couldn't blink away. She couldn't even speak at first. Ethan slowly extended the gift box toward her. "I made you something." Her hands shook as she opened the wrapping. Inside was a thick scrapbook, colorful and clearly created with hours of care. She opened the cover and saw the first page decorated with photos of the three of them together. A picnic at the park, smiles, sunshine. Page after page was filled with memories, birthday candles, soccer practices, road trips, goofy photos, little moments that she did not even know he had saved. He had included movie ticket stubs, notes from school assignments she helped him with, little souvenirs. Even a leaf from the park where they used to walk during fall afternoons. On the last page, in Ethan's slightly messy but deeply sincere handwriting were the words, "To Sarah, my other mom. Thank you for loving me." The tears Sarah had been holding back finally spilled down her cheeks. She looked up at Ethan, who stood quietly, cheeks red, hands tucked into his sleeves. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him tightly, holding him close. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice cracking, "this is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me." And for the first time, Ethan didn't pull away or stiffen. He hugged her back, firmly, genuinely. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," he said softly. Sarah held the scrapbook against her chest for a long moment, as if she needed to steady her own heartbeat. The warmth of Ethan's hug still lingered on her arms, and she felt a softness spread through her entire body. For years she had wondered if she was overstepping, if she was simply floating around the edges of his world. But now, in that softly lit hallway filled with hand-cut snowflakes and glowing lights, she felt something she hadn't dared let herself believe before. She felt like she truly belonged. Ethan stepped back a little, rubbing the back of his neck in that nervous way he had whenever he didn't know what to do next. Sarah studied him for a moment. The boy she met at 12, distant and guarded, now standing before her, almost grown, taller than her, yet suddenly looking young again in the dim lights. "Did your dad help with any of this?" she asked gently, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. Ethan shook his head quickly. "No, I did it myself. I wanted it to be from me." Something inside her softened even more at that. She reached up and smoothed a wrinkle on his shoulder, a simple gesture she wasn't even sure he would accept, but he didn't shy away. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Every part of it." "Thank you," nodded, glancing down like he was embarrassed to hear the words. "I know you've been tired. You've been working a lot. I just thought, Maybe this would make you feel a little lighter. It does, she said, her voice almost a whisper. More than you know. They stood there for another quiet moment as the soft holiday music drifted up from downstairs. It felt like time had paused just for them, giving them the chance to breathe in everything that had changed between them. The small gestures, the slow growth, the steady effort. They had all led to this moment. After a moment, Ethan let out a small breath. I also made hot chocolate. It's downstairs. I didn't know when you'd be home, so it might not be super hot anymore, but I can warm it up. Sarah let out a shaky laugh, the kind that comes from a mix of happiness and exhaustion. Hot chocolate sounds perfect. They walked downstairs together, their steps matching naturally in a way they never had before. The living room was glowing softly with the lights of the tree they had decorated as a family a week earlier. Sarah had always loved the way Ethan placed ornaments, carefully, almost seriously, as if every decoration carried a small story. She suddenly realized that maybe it did. Ethan headed to the kitchen to warm the mugs, and Sarah sank down on the couch, still holding the scrapbook gently in her lap. She flipped through a few more pages while waiting. Little notes were tucked into pockets she hadn't seen. Tiny drawings he made years ago, a scribbled, "Thanks for helping me study." Even an old grocery receipt from the first time she let him choose the snacks. Each item felt like a quiet message from different points in time, each one saying, "I noticed you." Even when I didn't show it. Ethan returned with 2 mugs, the steam rising softly. He handed one to her and sat down across from her, fidgeting with the handle of his own mug. Sarah watched him for a moment. There was something new in his eyes, something open, unguarded, maybe even proud. "Hey," she said softly. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah," he said, lifting his eyes. "When did you start working on all this?" He hesitated. "A few weeks ago. Maybe a little more." He exhaled through his nose, almost smiling. "I kept thinking about all the stuff you've done. I don't know, it just felt like it was time." "Time for what?" Sarah asked. He shrugged slightly. "To stop pretending I didn't care." Her throat tightened again, and she set her mug down to keep from spilling it. "Ethan, you never had to pretend anything for me. I just wanted to be here for you." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I made the scrapbook." Sarah leaned back into the cushions, letting the words settle over her. The room felt warmer than usual, filled with something soft and steady. She watched Ethan sip his drink, his shoulders relaxing for what felt like the first time. After a long moment, he spoke again. "I know my mom lives far, and I know she will always be my mom. But," he paused, searching for the right words. "You're here. You're the one who stayed. You're the one who shows up." Sarah felt tears slip silently down her face. She didn't even bother wiping them this time. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan's lips lifted in a small, honest smile. "Merry Christmas, Sarah." She smiled back, her heart full. "Merry Christmas, Ethan." They sat there in the quiet glow of the Christmas tree, sipping their warm drinks, letting the peaceful silence settle around them. It wasn't the kind of silence filled with distance or tension like the early years had been. This was a soft silence, the kind that feels safe, the kind that wraps around a room and lets everyone breathe a little easier. Sarah felt her muscles loosen slowly, as though her body was finally allowing itself to rest after carrying so much for so long. Ethan set his mug down on the coffee table and leaned back, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "Dad's working late," he said casually, his voice calm. "He said he'd be home by 10. Sarah nodded. "That sounds like him," she said with a small smile. "He always tries to catch up before the holiday rush." Ethan nodded. "Yeah. But I wanted to do this before he got home. I didn't want him to think he needed to plan anything. This was supposed to be between us." Sarah felt that sentence hit her gently, like a warm hand placed on top of hers. "Between us." For years, she had wanted those words, hoped for them in the quiet corners of her heart, yet never expected to hear them spoken so easily. "I'm glad," she said softly. "I really am." Ethan looked at her for a moment, studying her face the way someone might study a photograph, as if trying to understand something they had looked at 1,000 times but never really seen. "You always tried with me," he said, his tone strangely thoughtful. "Even when I didn't give you anything back." Sarah let out a careful breath, trying to keep her voice steady. I knew you were hurting. Losing the life you expect easy for anyone, especially a kid. I just didn't want to make things harder. You didn't, Ethan said quickly. I mean, I didn't see it back then, but you were trying to help. You were trying to, I don't know, make things feel normal. She smiled faintly. I was just trying to be someone you could count on. Well, he said, rubbing his palms together lightly. You were. The simplicity of his words touched her more than long speeches ever could. She looked at the scrapbook again, letting her fingers trace the edges of the cover. This must have taken you so much time, she said. I didn't mind, he replied. Honestly, it helped me think, going through old stuff, remembering little things. It made me realize I wasn't as alone as I thought back then. Sarah's chest tightened again, but this time it didn't hurt. It felt like something was finally settling into place. Something that had been loose for years. Ethan shifted slightly on the couch. There's another thing, he said after a moment. Sarah looked up, surprised. There's more. He nodded slowly. Not another gift, he said, just something I wanted to say. She waited, her hands still resting on the scrapbook, her heart beating calmly now, steady and open. He took a quiet breath. One dad told me he was going to marry you. I thought you were going to take something away from me. He spoke carefully, like he was choosing each word with purpose. I thought having you meant he cared less about me. Or like, maybe there would be less space for me. Sarah leaned forward slightly, listening with full attention. But that wasn't true. Ethan said gently. You didn't take anything. You actually added something. You made things better. You made him happier. And whether I admitted it or not, you made me happier too. Sarah felt her eyes heat again, but she didn't look away. I guess what I'm trying to say, Ethan continued slowly, is that I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're part of this family. The living room lights flickered softly against the ornaments, reflecting tiny glimmers of gold and red onto the walls. Sarah took a long breath, letting the moment sink deep into her heart. I'm glad too, she whispered. More than you know. Ethan offered her a small smile, the kind he rarely used, the one that had sincerity tucked inside it. Sarah reached out gently and placed her hand over his. This time, instead of freezing or pulling back, he turned his hand slightly so their fingers rested comfortably together. For a long moment, they just stayed like that. Hands touching, breathing steady, hearts open. After a minute, Ethan stood up slowly. Do you want to watch a movie? He asked. We can put on that one you always like. The one you make us watch every Christmas, even though Dad pretends he hates it. Sarah laughed softly. He does pretend, she said. But he always watches it anyway. Yeah, Ethan said, grabbing the remote. So want to? Sarah nodded, warm and content. I'd love to. He turned on the TV and they settled into the couch, the soft glow of the holiday lights filling the room. Ethan sat closer than he used to. Not awkwardly, but naturally, like he no longer felt the need to keep distance. Sarah leaned back, feeling the warmth of the moment, feeling something in her heart finally settle into its rightful place. The movie started playing quietly, but for Sarah, the real story was the one unfolding beside her. The one she had waited years to see grow. And I remember standing there for a long moment, longer than made sense, because something inside me felt like it had been shaken open. It was as if the room had changed shape around us, like the air had softened and grown warmer. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and careful, almost matching the tiny breaths coming from the baby's chest. And somewhere behind that sound was the quiet truth I had not admitted to myself until now. That this little life was already changing me. Even though she was only a few days old. It was happening without my permission, without any announcement. The way sunrise appears before you fully understand that night is over. I shifted my arms slightly, making sure she was held just right, and I looked over at my wife again. She was watching us with a tired smile, the kind that carried both relief and a little ache. She looked like she wanted to sink into the moment, but was afraid she might fall apart if she did. And I understood that feeling. I understood how heavy love can be when you suddenly realize how fragile everything is. I walked closer to her and sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the baby, letting her see that she was not alone in this new world we had stepped into together. She reached toward me, not for the baby this time, but for my hand, her fingers wrapped around mine with a kind of desperate softness, like she was reminding herself that I was real, that I was staying, that we were in this life side by side. I squeezed back, not too hard, just enough to say what I couldn't form into words yet. The room felt quieter now, almost like it was waiting for us to settle into our roles, to accept what we had become without rushing or pretending we understood it all. The baby shifted slightly in my arms, letting out a small breath that sounded almost like a sigh. I felt her warmth through the blanket, and something inside me tightened and opened at the same time. It was strange how a single tiny movement could make me feel like the ground under my feet had changed. I adjusted my hold again and let her rest her cheek against my chest, and in that simple action, everything felt calmer. Maybe it was the rhythm, maybe it was the closeness, or maybe it was the quiet understanding that I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be here. My wife leaned her head back against the pillow, her eyes softening as she watched me. There was a look there I couldn't ignore, a look that told me she was seeing a part of me she had hoped was there, but wasn't sure she would ever witness. And it made my chest feel warm in a strange, unfamiliar way. I reached over with my free hand and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself rest in that touch, like it was something she had been needing, but didn't know how to ask for. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, steady and slow, and the soft hum of the night outside filled the gaps between our breaths. The shadows in the room stretched gently, not in a harsh way, but in a peaceful one, as if they knew they didn't to hide anything tonight. Everything felt raw and real and honest. And for the first time since we brought her home, the house didn't feel too big or too silent. It felt full, like every corner held a small piece of hope that had been missing for a long time. I could smell the faint scent of baby lotion and warm skin, mixed with the lingering smell of the dinner we had not fully finished earlier. It grounded me in a strange way, reminding me that life was still happening in small, simple pieces. I shifted slightly so my wife could rest her head against my shoulder, and she did, slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to disturb the fragile balance we had built in this moment. The three of us sat there in a soft, unspoken circle, breathing in the same quiet, learning each other without rushing. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. She said she was scared, not in a dramatic way, but in the way people speak when they're finally honest, after hiding the truth behind a smile for too long. She said she didn't know if she would be good enough, if she would know what to do, if she would be strong enough to carry all the things motherhood required. Her voice trembled just a little, and she looked at me like she was waiting for me to pull away or offer some answer that sounded rehearsed. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence sit with us, because sometimes silence knows how to hold fear better than words. I told her she didn't have to know everything. I told her she didn't have to be perfect, that none of us knew how to do this, that we were learning as we went. She let out a breath that shook just a bit, and I felt her fingers tighten around mine. I leaned down and kissed her hair, slow and gentle, and she sank into me like the weight she had been carrying finally had a place to rest. The baby stirred again, a soft tiny sound, and my wife looked at her with a kind of wonder that seemed too big for such a small room. It was like she was seeing the world beginning again in the curve of that tiny face. And I realized that maybe she was. Maybe we both were. Maybe this was the start of something we didn't fully understand yet, but were already deeply connected to. I told her we would figure it out together. And she nodded, her eyes soft and shining in the low light. She leaned closer, her shoulder warm against mine, and we sat there in that slow, steady quiet, holding our newborn, holding each other, holding everything we were afraid of, and everything we were hoping for. The world outside kept moving, but in that moment, time felt like it had paused just long enough for us to catch our breath.